and welcome to episode one of Politics Daily. I'm Kevin, that's Colin. Today, we'll be talking about the George Santos resignation, McCarthy's ouster, and final departure from Congress. Oh, wait! No! Plot twist! This is Trails in the Pod, episode 64. Because today's episode is about something special. Take it away, Colin.
Okay, wow. So that's not what I was thinking of at all. But I'm glad to see you're taking the reins as the episode opener for you see, Kevin. Games, they're art forms, right? They're worthy of literary examination, of academic treatment. And what is more worthy of academic treatment than really getting to the core of academic treatment? And the constant that's in academia is procrastination. So we could have pushed and done Trails from Zero. That did not happen on account of my other responsibilities and Kevin's other responsibilities. So we are doing the whole academic treatment.
What responsibilities do I
I
have,
was giving
Colin?
you the benefit of the doubt. We are pulling the academic treatment and doing something completely different. And Kevin, what is that?
It's a plot twist. We'll talk about what makes a good plot twist, examples from games in common we've played. You'll talk about a game that you have some interesting thoughts and feelings about you just beat. And then later on, we'll talk about one of my very hot take beliefs about the plot twist and how it relates to the academic interrogation of games as valid art forms.
Before we get started with that, Kevin, I'm just curious because this episode was your idea. So, what made you decide to suggest it?
It was on the list of special topic episodes that we have not done in the Google Doc.
That is a good reason, and it's also
I wanted to, have us do an episode on something that we could get some interesting perspectives, most likely divergent feelings about either in detail or structure as a whole, so we don't take another month or a couple weeks between episodes, keep the momentum going. And is there anything more apropos to this topic than suddenly springing it upon you as, hey, let's do an episode on it?
no, it was a good idea, and I think we need to get back into finding episodes like this. The Buffer State project is a good idea and one that we should probably continue on, but that requires a lot of investment in time, as does playing through the games. Something like this we can actually do, and we're going to have another episode out this month around Christmas. That's similarly something that we can just put out. It's going to be our year in review. So at the very least, there will be more content this month than there has been in the past few months.
The plot twist. That's like I think we both know generally what a plot twist is. But nailing something down, even if it's hard, I think especially if it's hard, is important when discussing such an important topic for not just games, but media as a whole. It's in art, or it's in literature, television, movies. Is it in music? Is it in, say, sculpture or paintings? I don't think so. If you have other thoughts, maybe, but it's definitely in games, in novels, in movies, in television shows, where narrative is important.
Yeah, no, I think a plot twist it's a narrative device. It's the only way that you can have a plot twist in music is if the music itself is telling a story. So we can see that in like certain parody songs or operatic songs, epic songs. You know, if you want to call Homer a song, which I mean the poems were sung, or like even in a musical. But instrumental, I think you have to have a plot in order for there to be a plot twist. So I'm gonna let me suggest a common definition for the plot twist. You can comment on it, and then I want us to talk a little bit more about the theory behind a plot twist and how it works. So the definition of a plot twist that I thought up in approximately 15 minutes, so it's very well thought out, is that it is an unexpected turn of events that complicate the narrative, which the viewer or player likely did not see coming, with the goal of making the narrative more exciting or dynamic. What are your thoughts on that definition?
I think it's a good one. I think the likely did not see coming does enough work to preserve the element of surprise, which I think is really quite important, while not discounting varying levels of possibilities, probabilities that clues were laid or could be guessed, the nature of the plot twist. Joshua at the end of FC is a good one, or other ones that we may name, but there's a shock value almost.
Yeah, I definitely think that like surprise is a big thing. One thing that we might want to hash out is should the listener or viewer or player be allowed to guess the plot twist for it to be effective? And the reason why is because if you can guess it, then is it really a plot twist at all? And is it instead just a natural occurrence of the narrative that had been hinted at enough that it takes away the shock value?
Yeah, what's the difference between this and, say, foreshadowing?
Right. And it's weird because I'm one of the things that I want to argue in this podcast is that a good plot twist cannot come out of nowhere, because you have to have enough stakes and enough of the ability to follow along to understand how the plot twist works. So there has to be a fine line between the narrative giving you enough to be prepared for the plot twist, but it has to be hidden enough that it will take, I think, most people or the average player by surprise.
The moment the moment is so crucial in the plot twist. Even if in retrospective you say this makes sense or I should have been paying attention, it's that moment of surprise. It's the epiphany almost cathartic of everything has changed or my outlook on the world has changed.
I'm glad that you used the word cathartic because catharsis is this concept that we get from Aristotle when he's talking in the Poetics about how the audience feels a connection with the characters in the play. And when he's discussing Greek tragedy, the audience feels this connection with the characters in the tragedy. They undergo their sufferings, and then that feeling of shared suffering allows for an emotional release on the part of the audience, thus called catharsis. And in thinking about what a plot twist is, I found Aristotle quite interesting to think about, because he outlines two ways or two key elements of the plot twist. Would you like to know what they are, Kevin Bloomfield?
And this is important because this is one of the very first, if not the first, self critical reflections on narrative structure, on dramatic organization, on what makes a story. What are the component parts? So, that this is one of the examples, the earliest thought exercises on literature, on narrative, includes a plot twist in a fairly prominent position really speaks to the centrality within our creative culture.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to think with. I'm sure that people have taken Aristotle and thought more about these different concepts, but it's a good touchstone. So let's start with the first one. I'm going to read out everything that I'm going to be reading out here is from chapter 11 of Aristotle's Poetics. And if you're interested in reading more, you can get English translations or German translations or whatever kind of language you speak online for free. They might be a little bit old, but they're still easy to read, in my opinion. So chapter 11 starts off by defining, quote, the reversal of the situation is a change by which the action veers round to its opposite, subject always to our rule of probability or necessity. Thus, in Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, the messenger comes to cheer Oedipus and free him from his alarms about his mother, but by revealing who he is, he produces the opposite effect. Again, in the Lynceus is being led away to his death, and Danaus goes with him, meaning to slay him. But the outcome of the preceding incidents is that Danaus is killed and Lynceus saved. I want to stop there and kind of explain a bit more what he means using the Oedipus example. We can't comment much on the Lynceus because I don't think that tragedy survives, but we do have the Oedipus, and I happened to teach a course on it last year, so I know that play pretty well. And the for the broad strokes, I think we all have some kind of idea of who Oedipus is. It's common. It's a cultural reference point in which Oedipus is the man who killed his father and married his mother. The story goes that Oedipus had received a an oracle that he was going to kill his father and marry his mother, so he ran away. He's like, I love my parents. I'm going to flee them so that I don't actually do this. So he starts wandering on the road. He's attacked by somebody who's on the road. He kills them and then makes his way to the city of Thebes, where the Sphinx is attacking the city of Thebes, and Oedipus is able to save the city by essentially giving out the answer to a riddle. The common riddle is what has four legs at birth, two legs in middle age, and three legs at the end of life. And the answer is man, because you're crawling as a baby, you're standing upright as a man, or as an old person, you have a cane.
Yeah, people were stupid back in Thebes.
They were pretty fucking stupid because the Sphinx was attacking them for a long time and they could not figure this out. Meanwhile, they had a prophet named Tiresias who could like talk to the gods, but he couldn't figure it out apparently. So they make Oedipus his king because everybody knows that if you can solve a riddle, you should become king. A plague hits the city because it is foretold that his the king of Thebes had been murdered, and they need to expel the polluter out in order to save the city. So Oedipus starts a an investigation to find out what happened to the king, because the Thebans never once actually thought to investigate what happened to their king who disappeared. They just made Oedipus the king. And while that investigation is going on, he starts to connect some dots that are starting to suggest to him that maybe Oedipus actually killed Laius, the former king. And a messenger comes from Corinth, where Oedipus is originally from, to announce the death of his adopted mother. I believe he phrases this as saying, like, I don't remember the exact wording, but either way, the point there is to assuage Oedipus's fears by reporting the death of his parents, who Oedipus at that point did not think were adopted, that he was adopted by them. But it's revealed that he was. And all of a sudden, then he comes to this realization of, oh, fuck, I actually did kill my father and marry my mother. So, what Aristotle is saying there is that dramatically, we have a situation in which one outcome is supposed to happen, but the opposite outcome occurs in a way that still makes linear logical sense in following the narrative. It's not skipping anything. It's not causing you to like just understand that something weird happens. It follows linear progress, but it comes out to an unexpected outcome.
Linear progress, unexpected outcome, and it's made all the more impactful because we are told about the prophecy and the slowly accumulating piles of evidence that lead Oedipus to be incorrect in his initial interpretation of it. But Colin, I have a question for you about not just this, but other similar types of dramatic reversals. When the audience has either expanded knowledge, outside
Sure.
knowledge, or can put clues together quickly, is there an instance or a spectrum in which this becomes not a plot twist, but say dramatic irony, where the characters know less than the player, the viewer? So is that a plot twist in that case? If we put it together because we're really smart and attentive, or because we
Yeah.
know the myth or whatever, does a plot twist, I'm essentially saying, have to be surprising to be a plot twist?
So I think in looking at the text of the Oedipus Rex itself, it is a plot twist on account of the plot is going one way and then the outcome is the opposite way. There is an unexpected quote unquote change. That said, Sophocles is writing this in an area in which everybody knows the Oedipus myth. So he's clearly playing with it. In fact, Fred All has this idea that Oedipus is misled, and that in Sophocles' version specifically, he did not kill his father and marry his mother. He was lied to. I'm undecided on this particular issue. I think he makes some interesting arguments, but not completely convinced. I don't think that you can assume the out in looking at the Oedipus itself. You can't use outside knowledge as dramatic irony. What would be dramatic irony is if we had another scene that that gives the viewer that direct knowledge, and that's part of the plot itself, and then Oedipus finds out later when we've already known.
Within just the play, within the tabula rasa, audience knows nothing more than the play. Still a plot twist.
But it's a complicated thing. Or like here's something. So the way that I introduced the concept of mythology to my students last year was by comparing Greek myth to Spider-Man. Because with Marvel, with characters in Marvel, they're part of this interconnected universe in which there are pre-established relationships, pre-established identities. For the most part, Spider-Man is almost always Peter Parker. Recently, he's also been Miles Morales, though this is a different type of Spider-Man, and they're often in the universe together, right? So we tend to come in to reading a new Spider-Man story with certain expectations. Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Aunt May is his surrogate mother. Ben, not Ben, Uncle Ben will be murdered, which triggers Spider-Man's call to responsibility. Certain identities of supervillains they have like an ideal type. You know, Otto Octavius becomes Doc Ock. Norman Osborn almost always becomes the Green Goblin. Eddie Brock becomes Venom. But then within the structure of that, you can change things. So if you play the latest Spider-Man game, Eddie Brock is not a character. Venom's identity is somebody else. And by playing with the identity, then the creators of Spider-Man 2 can change the narrative by playing off of our pre-existing knowledge. I would not call the identity of Venom in Marvel Spider-Man 2 to be dramatic irony, but I would call it playing with the pre-existing narrative, which is what you can do with pre-existing myths.
Okay, what about the 98% of literature that does not tie into these expanded universes for modern media or, say, mythography for pre-modern? Say you have a fantasy novel or a game protagonist or someone has uncertain parentage, and say it's derivative and tropey and cliched, and midway through the first act or the first chapter, you're
Mhm.
like, oh, he's going to be the long lost heir to the throne or the son of the evil king or whatever, and you guess it, and it turns out that way. Or you guess this farm person really has a secret destiny. Say Rand is the dragon reborn, or Wheel of Time, or generic protagonist acts as the son of the evil king, or just something like that. If you guess it, and you can guess it, is it a plot twist? I guess what I'm saying, what I'm trying to get at, you talked about, and you said how you think being able to have it not be out of the blue random is important for a plot twist to be effective.
No, I mean, I what I'm saying is that a plot twist should not necessarily be completely like out of the blue. There should be plausibility to it.
Yeah,
It is not necessarily something that you should have to be able to
but
guess.
not foreshadowing.
Yeah, I don't think a plot twist needs to have foreshadowing. I think it can have foreshadowing. But what I'm saying is that at that moment, it has to have plausibility.
Take Joshua, for example. I don't think we could have guessed the society or the assassin, maybe the assassin, not the details, based on the evidence presented in the text. That he had an uncertain path and weird set of skills is not in dispute, but the reversal changes our interpretation and understanding of these one-off incidents, or what say you, in the first three quarters, the first, say, 90% of the game, if not more, but you couldn't guess the whole Vice Wing connection, whatever, based on that.
No, exactly. So, like with Joshua, we knew something was up, right? You were guessing stuff all from the beginning, and have myself having the knowledge of what it was. I saw enough in the beginning to say, like, oh, this was actually hinted at quite early, and things like that are happening all over the time in Trails. But I don't think there's enough there to guess the exact detail. But
Kevin Graham.
right, Kevin Graham. Like there, some of Kevin Graham comes a little bit out of the blue. It's still within the realm of plausibility, just because there's enough mystery built up about Kevin, and he's clearly a man of ability. So, like when he comes out to be the Grohl's Ritter, you're like, oh, okay, This explains some stuff, but it's a little bit getting close to jumping the shark until the rest of the intellectual infrastructure of the Church of the Gralsritter is built up because of Kevin. But speaking of Joshua and that scene at the end of FC, I want to read a little bit more Aristotle to help us think about the mechanics of that scene because it's a recognition scene, right? Where Joshua finally realizes, oh, this is what happened. Something is revealed to him, and it's this is a
I love flute players, Colin.
wait, what?
Wrong Aristotle. I'm sorry. I thought you were saying the flute should go to the best flute player.
I don't think Aristotle says that. It sounds like something out of the Symposium or like Hellenistic poetry. What are you talking about?
Oh, it's Plato. I'm sorry.
I've read the Symposium, man. I know what's in there. All right, so continuing on through chapter 11, Aristotle goes on to say recognition, as the name indicates, is a change from ignorance to knowledge, producing love or hate between the persons destined by the poet for good or bad fortune. The best form of recognition is coincident with a reversal of the situation, as in the Oedipus. So, like the moment that Oedipus realizes finally what he had done, also changes his situation from good to bad. So it's the combination of the two that make dramatically makes that play work. There are indeed other forms. Even inanimate things of the most trivial kind may, in a sense, be objects of recognition. Again, we may recognize or discover whether a person has done a thing or not, but the recognition, which is most intimately connected with the plot and action, is, as we have said, the recognition of persons. This recognition, combined with the reversal, will produce pity or fear, and actions producing these effects are those which, by our definition, tragedy represents. Moreover, it is upon such situations that the issues of good or bad fortune will depend. Recognition then being between persons, it may happen that one person only is recognized by the other, when the latter is already known, or it may be necessary that the recognition should be on both sides. Thus, Iphigenia is revealed to Orestes by the sending of the letter, but another act of recognition is required to make Orestes known to Iphigenia. So, by this, Iphigenia and Orestes are separated for quite a long time. And then Orestes, if I'm remembering the plot right, Orestes knows that Iphigenia is alive, but a separate act of recognition is needed for Iphigenia to know that Orestes is there, because just the way that the plot works. In summary, the recognition scene is that moment in which how do I put this? In which characters gain knowledge of the rest of the plot in a lot of ways. That there has been things happening outside of that character's dramatic purview, whether we know it or not. Right? It could be that we have dramatic irony. It might not be that we have dramatic irony here, but it's this moment in which characters start to realize the wholeness of the situation, when they start to really grasp the true nature of the situation. Just as Joshua did upon being revealed, oh, actually, I've been a spy for Ouroboros this entire time.
Does the plot twist then combine both elements?
I think I think that it can. It doesn't necessarily have to, because a plot twist is more viewer or player or reader centric, in which moments of the plot changes from our perspective. So one can foresee or even experience knowledge being revealed in a different scene away from uh, the character. Like the character doesn't know about it, but we know. And so then the recognition from the part of the character to the wholeness of the situation might not be a plot twist if that information had already been revealed to us. Say, for instance, if Joshua was revealed to be a member of Ouroboros a chapter before he found out about it, that would still be a plot twist for us. But then the moment of recognition would not be a plot twist.
It was I think, all the more impactful because it was revealed to us at the same time as with to Estelle, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, what I find interesting is that okay, what is tragedy? Because tragedy is not like a novel in which you have this external narrator telling you all the stuff, and then there are characters within it that would allow you to switch from scene to scene or stuff like that. What tragedy is inherently
Eh, that I think is that sounds like an omniscient point of view. But if you have a point of view that closely follows the character, that's different.
right. I get that. What I'm trying to make the argument of is that tragedy, by its nature, is inherently character focused. Maybe not necessarily character driven, but character focused, because all of the narrative is delivered by dialogue from the characters, and you're normally following a very small set of characters. And in that way, that makes Aristotle's understanding of literature more applicable to something like the early Trails games, like FC, in which we are following Estelle and Joshua. The reason why that scene at the end of FC is so effective is because we have three things happening at once. A, reversal of fortune. We go from a triumphal, fantastic, we just stopped a coup moment to this revealing of no, this has actually been part of Ouroboros' plan. There's more evil afoot. Joshua has actually been part of the enemy by accident this entire time, right? So there we were going up, now we're going down. It's at that same moment that Joshua recognizes this. It's his recognition scene. Already, Aristotle is telling us that a recognition is most effective at a situation of reversal, at a reversal of situation. But then on top of that, just like in tragedy, and this is what Aristotle assumes, but now we have to put in place, is that we are learning it at the same time as Joshua. All three of those things come together, which then makes for probably the most impactful scene of that game. And then, so this is just to finish up chapter 3, but then I think kind of shows the literary mastery of that scene. He finishes up two parts then of the plot: reversal of the situation and recognition turn upon surprises. A third part is the scene of suffering. The scene of suffering is a destructive or painful action, such as death on the stage, bodily agony, wounds, and the like. What he's not saying there, but what he implies is that often this will come as a consequence of the recognition and the reversal of the situation. And that's exactly what happens at the end of FC, where we get Joshua's reversal of situation and recognition, and then he turns back to Estelle, who reveals her love for Joshua, and his decision is to break her heart and to move on, which is heartbreaking. You know, I remember the first time that I played this, I screamed no at the television in the middle of the night, no doubt waking up my poor neighbor. It's emotionally effective, and I haven't even thought about this until this podcast, but the end of FC is mapping onto what Aristotle has laid out as an ideal tragic plot back in like 400 BC. It's like 300 and something BC, but still a long ass time ago.
It's a basic formula, but man, if you hit it in the right spots at the right time, it just works so well.
Kevin, can I talk about a game that I have experienced recently that did not pull this off correctly?
Yeah. Is it Candy Crush?
It is not Candy Crush. I am very pleased to say I have never once played Candy Crush.
Is it Yakuza 4?
It is Yakuza 4. So I'm trying to get through the Yakuza series. I played Yakuza 3 at the beginning of the year, and I figured it was a good game that I could like come in and out of while I was busy doing other things. And I enjoyed it. It's a good game. I love the Yakuza series, and I really took my time with it. So I played a lot of the sub stories. All of that is important because in terms of character development on the part of the protagonists, Yakuza 4 is fantastic. But in terms of its development of its villains, it's shit. It's really not good. And my thesis of bringing this up is that it is a consequence of its overuse of the plot twist. So, Kevin, you have not played a Yakuza game. I'm sure some of our viewers or listeners have. I don't know how many. I'm going to warn you now that I will be discussing a few key things, especially for the end of Yakuza 4. So if you don't want to listen to that, then try to scrub through to where we stop talking about it. But the basic plot of a Yakuza game in general starts off with a big mystery, and then you kind of go back in time to a flashback. Normally, that big mystery puts the protagonist in a compromising position that once you actually get to that point in the narrative, you realize it's not so compromising. And then by the end of the game, the person who you thought actually was the villain is not the villain, and the true villain is normally somebody who you have been allied with, or maybe you do know that they were the villain, but they're doing it for more noble reasons, and it turns into more a battle of wills rather than good versus evil, and honor is at stake, and yada yada yada. Yakuza 4 is fascinating because it's the probably the most ambitious plot that I've played in the series so far, in that there are four main characters, and as a consequence, four main villains that you have to fight at the end. None of the villains that you fight at the end are the people you think you're going to fight in the beginning. But the way that they bring this all about is that near the end of the game, it's like every 5 minutes, the person who what you think the villain is doing changes. Guy like Arai, first you think that he is Yakuza. Then you think, okay, well, now he's acting against the Yakuza. Now he's part of this different clan that's fighting the Tojo clan. Okay, well, now he's a cop. Well, now he just killed a cop. Well, now he actually didn't kill a cop, and the cop that he thought that he killed is now his ally, but also his enemy, and it just gets confusing. But the biggest problem with all of that is that because the game is putting in so much effort in giving us these twists and turns to keep the narrative interesting, what it forgets to do is develop the characters, the villains' motivations. The entirety of the plot of Yakuza 4 is centered around the control of 100 billion yen, or something to that, a large amount of money, and hiding how this money had been used by the cops to bribe the Tojo clan, which is part of the Yakuza. And the key villain at the end is a police chief that you only meet like three-fourths of the way through the game. And the game, to my recollection, never actually tells you why he's doing what he's doing. But then at the end, you have him as the main villain. You have the head of the Tojo clan as the main villain, who only describes why he did what he did at the last moment. In fact, is only revealed to be a villain at the last moment. You have this Arai guy who you can at least you followed him a little bit, so you have a conception, but he only reveals why he did what he did at the end. This other guy who's been an ally named Keto, he's also a main villain. Not really sure why he's a main villain. It made the ending really unsatisfying because the game tried to be too flashy with its narrative as opposed to laying out these foundations, the fundamentals that we had just discussed in context of FC. And so, what I'm trying to stress here is that plot twists can be quite effective so long as all of the other elements are in place. But if you, as a writer, are over relying on the device to create narrative tension, by the end of the narrative, it's going to fizzle out because everything, a narrative requires you to understand the motivations of the actors at play. And if you don't know what they are by the end of the narrative, then you stop giving a fuck about the narrative. And that's a failure state.
And how much was it hurt by the succession of plot twists? Like you could not wasn't there's no narrative certainty ground beneath your feet.
I mean, that's a big one, especially since sometimes it seemed like characters were coming in and out, and you could never really quite tell who was connected to who, and for what reasons and at what times. It's and this is part of where also the sub stories might have hurt the narrative, but we have to keep this in mind because it's an inherent part of the design of a Yakuza game. A Yakuza game is, you could call it open world. The world is very small. Maybe you want to call it open zone because there might be like two different zones you could go to, but we have a main quest and then we have a bunch of side quests that are there for each chapter. And the side quests are normally a little bit zany, a little bit goofy. Sometimes they have really deep stories as well that concentrate on the character that you're playing as. And then the main story, that's the overarching thread throughout. But you can hit like a really important main story thread and then go screw off for 10 hours to do sub stories and then come back to that main quest. But if every time you hit the main quest, the fundamental part of the narrative completely changes, then by the time you actually get to the end, 52 hours later, you will have completely lost the thread of that plot. This could be remedied by just playing through the plot straight through, but then you're missing out on a lot of the content of the game. Clearly, the designers want you to play the sub stories. That's where some of the best moments of Yakuza games are. So they have to design it around you taking these breaks.
How many plot twists were there in FC? Basically one. And it worked really well because we were not given.
I think there was two: Richard and the coup.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that when thinking about plot twists. This may just be me.
Richard is presented to us as like this arch liberal patriot, that's working in cooperation with everybody. He's a good guy. And then once we hit the end of chapter 3, it's revealed, oh, he's trying to overthrow the monarchy. That's a plot twist.
Question for you to play Kevin's advocate. Joshua, it's the 95th percent of the game, if not more. It is basically the end of the end. Chapter 3, you still have quite a bit of time left to go. Does where when it takes place in the narrative matter of making it twisty? Like how soon is too soon where it's not a twist? It's just something about the character.
I think at that point it's still definitely a plot twist. I mean, maybe if it happened in the same chapter that we were introduced to Richard, or immediately thereafter, that wouldn't really be a plot twist. That would just be part of his introduction scene. But by that point, we had gotten a decent idea of who Richard was. We were reading about him in the newspaper. People were talking about him. We had met him, and then he turns around and becomes the opposite of what we thought that he was. Just because we have the narrative afterwards to see how that plays out, that doesn't make it not a plot twist. It means that the narrative has given itself room to explore the ramifications of the plot twist, which makes for good narrative.
Yeah. I don't know. Like you said, you need a firm grounding in however long it takes to build before you can yank it out from beneath our feet for it to work. Otherwise, it's just one set of quicksand after another.
Kevin, you said that you wanted to have a hot take, which all your takes are like icy cold, TBH, but I want to see if this one's going to make me get that chili pepper.
Okay, kind of forget it. I think it was. Oh yeah, it's not a hot take after hearing you talk about it and then us develop. It was, plot twist doesn't have to be guessable, but it can't come out of the blue.
Oh, yeah, that's not a hot take. That's like the thesis we started the episode on.
Yeah, I thought it would be more of a hot take because we've talked in fair detail about essentially guessability. I think the thesis or the framework that we've developed with Aristotle's help and without is a good one.
I mean, I do think that we should stress that surprise is an important part. And that's why I want to like I don't think it should necessarily be able to be trackable one by one by one by one, but what it does have to do, like let's say that the narrative has developed
No.
in a linear fashion. In trying to guess key plot points, it might have given you out of five breadcrumb one, three, and four, and two and five are still missing. And then a plot twist comes, and that can fill in two and five, and then you see how one, two, three, four, five progress in a linear fashion. The things that it needs to explain, when you take that into your schema of what the narrative is, it has to continue to make sense. It has to be plausible. But I think if you can achieve that without providing all
Yeah.
of the context needed, uh, then the plot twist will create surprise, which is probably one of its goals.
Surprise for the sake of surprise is not something to be lauded or even desired in media, in narrative. And look at the end of Game of Thrones for.
Look at the end of Game of Thrones. I mean, that's the classic touch point at this point. That's when we all started to learn the phrase subverting expectations, and maybe we don't need our expectations to be subverted all the time.
So, what more to say about the plot twist? Well, Colin, would be a great twist?
Is if we just ended the episode?